Just a minute ago, he was calmly waiting for his luggage. 1 minute later, he was being treated like a suspect. But that officer had no idea he had just messed with the wrong person. Before we dive into this intense story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss more powerful stories like this. Silverdale International Airport was as chaotic as ever. Gate change announcements blaring over the intercom, children crying, business travelers glued to their phones, and exhausted passengers dragging their suitcases behind them. Jamal Hawkins had just stepped off a 5-hour flight from Charlotte, feeling a little stiff from sitting too long, but relieved to be back in New Mexico. Still, he wasn't the type to complain. Life was good at 45. He was the co-founder of a rapidly growing cybersecurity company, a name that was starting to gain recognition in the industry. But none of that mattered here. Here he was, just another passenger moving toward the baggage carousel. At least, that's what he thought, until he noticed the officer standing near the baggage claim entrance. Officer Blake Donovan stood with his arms crossed, eyes locked onto Jamal, as if he were tracking a suspect. A white man in his late 40s, broad-shouldered, wearing the standard TSA security uniform, nothing out of the ordinary except for the way he was staring, as if he were waiting for Jamal to make a wrong move. Jamal had seen this too many times before. He checked his phone, trying to ignore it. Maybe he was overthinking. Maybe Donovan was looking past him, not at him. But a minute later, when Jamal reached his baggage carousel, he glanced up again. Donovan was still there, still watching him. Not the disheveled businessman standing beside him. Not the group of teenagers messing around with half-open backpacks. Not the man in cargo shorts pacing back and forth, loudly complaining into his AirPods. Just him. All right then. Jamal exhaled, shaking his head. This wasn't the first time he'd been profiled, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. But then Donovan started moving, walking straight toward him. Jamal tightened his grip on his carry-on handle as the officer stopped just a few steps away, standing too close for it to be a casual interaction. "Let me see your ID," Donovan said, his tone firm, authoritative. Jamal blinked. "Excuse me." Donovan narrowed his eyes. "I need to see your identification." "For what reason?" "You've been standing here for a while," Donovan said. Jamal let out a surprised laugh. "Just like everyone else. We're all waiting for our luggage." Donovan's expression didn't change. "Just show me your ID." Jamal had a choice. He could comply, hand over his ID, and let this guy flex his authority as if he had the right to question him just for existing in an airport. Or he could do what he knew he should, push back. He slipped his phone into his pocket. "Is there a reason you're asking me and not anyone else?" Donovan's jaw tightened. "You match the description of someone we're looking for." Ah, there it was. Jamal crossed his arms. "And would you mind telling me what that description is?" A long pause. "Then we can do this the easy way or the hard way." "The hard way, just for asking a question." Jamal wasn't stupid. He knew where this could go. Push too far and things could escalate. Stay silent, and Donovan would walk away thinking he could do this to the next person, and the next. The question was, how far was Donovan willing to take this? But before Jamal could decide, someone made the decision for him. A voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, officer, is there a problem here?" Jamal turned. A woman in a navy blue blazer stood a few steps away, her phone raised. And in an instant, everything shifted. Officer Donovan hesitated for a second, his body tensing, his eyes darting toward the woman recording. Jamal recognized her immediately. Sophia Lee, award-winning investigative journalist, and the last person any officer wanted to be caught on camera with. She didn't lower her phone. "I just want to make sure everything here is being handled fairly," she said, her tone calm but firm. Donovan exhaled sharply, like an annoyed fly had just entered his space. He turned back to Jamal, frustration evident on his face. "Sir, I'm asking you one last time, show me your ID." Jamal stood his ground. "You still haven't told me why," he said, keeping his voice steady. "And if I really match a description, then there's no reason you can't explain it to me." The atmosphere in the terminal shifted. The noise around the baggage claim area, the conveyor belt humming, suitcases rolling, Distant chatter gradually faded beneath the growing silence. Other passengers began to take notice. A middle-aged black man in a navy blue hoodie. A young woman with bright red headphones draped around her neck. A white couple standing near the luggage carousel. They were all watching. Some discreetly pulled out their phones. Donovan felt it. His fingers twitched near his belt, close to his radio. He had a choice to back down or escalate, and his ego refused the first option. He reached out, grabbing Jamal's wrist. "All right, turn around." But Jamal took a step back, hands raised slightly, not in a threatening way, but clear enough. "What exactly are you trying to arrest me for?" Sophia's voice rang out again. "You might want to rethink that, officer. There are about 6 cameras on you right now." Donovan's head snapped toward her, his expression shifting from authority to irritation. This is a law enforcement matter. Step back." Sophia didn't blink. It became a public matter the moment you targeted him without cause. More voices started to rise, not loud, but enough to signal that this wouldn't simply be brushed aside. A woman nearby spoke up. "Yeah, why is he the only one being questioned?" A young man muttered, "I saw the whole thing. He was just standing here." Donovan's jaw tightened. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Usually, when he exerted authority, people complied, bowed their heads, answered questions, handed over their documents, made things easier. But not today. Jamal saw it in his eyes, that dawning realization that he had miscalculated. And then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, a new voice cut through the air. "Officer Donovan." The tone was firm and authoritative, coming from behind. Donovan turned, so did Jamal. A man in a gray jacket, an airport security badge clipped to his chest, was striding toward them. Leonard Brooks, the airport's head of security, a name Jamal had heard but never met in person. Brooks's sharp gaze scanned the scene, Donovan's rigid stance, Jamal's calm but tense demeanor, the gathering crowd, phones still recording. He assessed the situation instantly. His expression hardened. "What's going on here?" And in that moment, the balance of power shifted. The air was thick with tension. Donovan stiffened, clenching his jaw as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He knew Brooks outranked him in this space, but the frustration boiling inside him was hard to suppress. Jamal, by contrast, remained still, his heartbeat steady. He didn't smirk, didn't taunt, because this wasn't over yet. Brooks fixed his gaze on Donovan. "I asked you a question. What's the issue here?" Donovan hesitated. He knew how this looked, but backing down, not an option. "This individual was acting suspiciously," he said curtly. "He was lingering around the baggage claim area, and when asked for identification, he refused to cooperate." Jamal exhaled slowly through his nose. "I refused because he singled me out without cause. I'm standing here like everyone else, waiting for my luggage." Brooks's face darkened. He had worked in airport security long enough to recognize when a situation was spiraling. And this was one of those moments. He turned to Jamal. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience. Are you waiting for checked baggage?" Jamal nodded. "Yes." "Do you have your baggage claim ticket?" Without a word, Jamal pulled out his phone, scrolled to the digital copy of his baggage receipt, and held it up. Brooks glanced briefly, then turned back to Donovan. "Did you request this?" His voice was dangerously calm. Donovan's nostrils flared. "I asked for identification." Brooks' gaze turned sharp. "Did you ask for his baggage receipt?" Donovan didn't answer because they both knew the truth. Brooks exhaled, then turned to Jamal. "You may collect your luggage. Thank you for your patience." Jamal could have let it go. He could have simply walked away. But something inside him refused to do so. "This keeps happening." His voice was lower but heavier. "And the worst part is that people like him never even think twice about it." A wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Brooks nodded slowly. "I understand your frustration." "No, you don't." Jamal met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "But you can try." Silence fell. And Donovan's face turned red, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. Jamal didn't need an apology, not from him. Instead, he turned to Sophia, who was still recording. "Got enough footage?" She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with meaning. Donovan felt it, the weight of real consequences. Every eye in the room was on him, and in this era, that mattered more than the badge he wore. Brooks took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I'll be reviewing the footage, Officer Donovan. We'll have a discussion later." Jamal didn't need to gloat. He didn't need to do anything because the tide had shifted, and Donovan knew it. Donovan stood frozen, his face darkening, whether from anger or realization, no one could tell. What mattered was that he had lost control of the situation, and he knew it. But giving up wasn't in his nature. "You're making a mistake," Donovan muttered, his voice so low only Brooks could hear. Brooks didn't flinch. "The only mistake I see," he replied, "is an officer abusing his badge to harass a man who was just doing his duty." A few murmurs of agreement stirred through the crowd. A woman nearby whispered something to her friend, shaking her head. Someone else let out a quiet whistle of disapproval. Jamal had seen situations like this before, but he had never been on this side of it. Usually the system protected its own, but not today. Sophia stepped forward, lowering her phone slightly but still recording. "Officer Donovan, do you have any statement for the record?" The way Donovan snapped his head toward her made it feel like she had just slapped him across the face. His fists clenched at his sides. His mouth opened, then closed. His jaw tightened, but what could he say? Anything that left his lips could and would be used against him. Brooks didn't let the silence linger too long. "Donovan, you're suspended. Report to my office after your shift." Jamal saw it in Donovan's eyes, the battle between his pride and his training. His instinct to control the situation clashed with the cold reality that he had no power left. For a moment, Jamal wondered if he would resist, if he would cling to his authority and make things worse. But he didn't. Donovan stepped back. Then again. His eyes flickered toward Jamal, burning with resentment. Jamal met his gaze not with anger, not with triumph, but with simple recognition. This moment would stay with Donovan far longer than it would stay with Jamal. Without a word, Donovan turned and walked away. The moment he was gone, the air shifted. Someone let out a long breath. A man in a plaid shirt chuckled softly, shaking his head. A woman in a leather jacket muttered, "About time." And just like that, the crowd began to disperse. Jamal let his shoulders relax, exhaling deeply. The tension that had gripped his body for the last 10 minutes finally started to fade. Sophia stepped closer. "Are you okay?" Jamal gave a small, tired nod. "Yeah. You handled that situation really well. I shouldn't have had to handle it in the first place." Sophia pressed her lips together but didn't argue. Brooks cleared his throat. "Mr. Hawkins, once again, I sincerely apologize. If you'd like to file a formal complaint, I'm more than willing to assist you." Jamal shook his head. "That won't be necessary." Brooks blinked, clearly surprised. "No?" Jamal's voice was calm. "This will be handled another way." Brooks didn't ask what he meant. He didn't need to, because the world had already seen everything. By the time Jamal stepped out of the airport doors, the video was already online. Sophia hadn't wasted a second. Within minutes, the footage was uploaded, edited, and shared across multiple platforms. A video titled "Racism at SRA," Officer Harasses' innocent black man, was gaining traction fast. Jamal barely had time to take a breath before his phone buzzed. First, a text from his business partner. "This is blowing up. You good?" Then a call. A journalist from a major news outlet wanted a statement. Jamal exhaled slowly. He hadn't planned for any of this. He just wanted to go home. But now this was bigger than him. Sophia walked beside him as they headed toward the pickup area. "The video's at 93,000 views, she said, checking her phone. "Give it a few more hours, and it'll hit 6 figures. Jamal ran a hand down his face. "I didn't even do anything." That's exactly why people are angry. She wasn't wrong. Comments were flooding in. This is why we need accountability in law enforcement. How many times has he done this and gotten away with it? Respect to that man for keeping his cool. I wouldn't have. Fire him immediately. Jamal sighed. He wasn't the first to go through this. The only difference was this time people had seen it happen. Meanwhile, Donovan was in crisis. Within an hour, the police department had issued a statement, calling the incident deeply concerning and promising a full internal investigation. But that wasn't enough to stop the public outrage. Reporters started digging into Donovan's past. By the next morning, someone had uncovered 2 prior complaints against him for excessive force, both of which had been buried. But now, they were out in the open. Jamal's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some people wanted interviews. Others urged him to sue. Civil rights groups had already begun drafting official statements. And then, the real consequences started rolling in. By midday, Officer Blake Donovan was placed on suspension pending investigation. Jamal stared at the headline on his screen. What did he feel? Relief? Satisfaction? Not exactly. Because he knew what was coming next. The police union would fight to protect Donovan. Some news channels would try to spin the story. People online would argue about what Jamal should have done differently. And Donovan? He might end up at another police department just a few towns away. That's how it always goes. Sophia sat across from him at the airport cafe, watching him closely. Are you okay? Jamal tapped his phone lightly against the table, his eyes still fixed on the screen. This changes everything. Sophia raised an eyebrow. How? Jamal looked at her, his gaze unwavering. Because now I have to decide the next step. The power isn't just in the video, it's in the choice. And this time, he wasn't going to let it slip away. Jamal sat in his car staring at his phone screen. The news was spreading faster than he expected. His name was everywhere now, his face too. But this wasn't really about him. He scrolled through the flood of messages filling his inbox, some from old college friends, others from strangers. They thanked him and shared their own experiences. This happened to me last year at an airport in Phoenix. I filed a complaint, but nothing came of it. My brother went through this too, but he wasn't as lucky as you. They arrested him for resisting. Thank you for standing strong. We've seen this happen too many times. Jamal exhaled slowly. He had a choice. He could accept interviews, join a podcast, and maybe even file a lawsuit. But would any of that change anything? He glanced out the window, watching the endless stream of cars moving down Century Boulevard, the relentless pace of a city that never stopped. Sophia's voice echoed in his mind. You handled that really well. But did he? Or did he just survive it? His fingers hovered over the keyboard, then started typing. I didn't go looking for a confrontation today. I just wanted to go home. But the thing about moments like these is that they remind us staying silent doesn't stop this from happening. This isn't the first time, and it won't be the last. But maybe, just maybe, if we keep recording, keep pushing, keep demanding change, one day it will stop. He hit post. And just like that, the story was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone watching. Because raising awareness wasn't enough anymore. It was time to demand accountability. This happens more than we think. And too often, the people who endure it don't have a voice to fight back. If you believe that those in power must be held accountable, keep this conversation going. Keep speaking up. Keep demanding better. And if you've ever been in a similar situation, share your story. Because the more light we shine on injustice, the harder it becomes to ignore. As the story comes to a close, what truly matters is not just what happened, but the lessons we take from it. Omari has proven that an ordinary person can make an impact as long as they dare to stand up and speak out. His story is not just about injustice. It is about choices, the choice to remain silent and let things continue as they are, or the choice to take action and drive change. In this year, 2025, what can we do to make a difference? Let's start with small yet meaningful actions, raising awareness about racial discrimination, supporting organizations that fight for justice, and most importantly, refusing to turn a blind eye to the injustices we witness. Let's use social media not only to share Omari's story, but also to highlight our own experiences and those of the people around us. Because when enough voices come together, change will no longer be just a distant dream. Looking further ahead, by 2030, will the world truly be different? Will racism still exist? Perhaps we cannot eradicate it entirely within a few years, but we can make it increasingly difficult for it to persist. By fostering a new generation that refuses to accept injustice as the norm, by creating a society where people are judged by their character and actions rather than the color of their skin, or their background. We are laying the foundation for a better future. But this will only happen if we remain persistent, continue asking the hard questions, and hold those in power accountable. What about you? What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a similar situation? In your opinion, what is the best way to confront injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments because conversations like these bring us closer to a more just society. To me, Omari's story is not just a personal event, it is a reflection of our times. It serves as a reminder that justice does not happen on its own, we must fight for it. And if we refuse to let our outrage be buried in silence, if we remain persistent, courageous, and united, then one day stories like this will be nothing more than history. But that day will never come if we do not take action now. This story is entirely fictional, created with the purpose of raising awareness about important social issues. Our aim is to emphasize personal and collective responsibility, the spirit of justice, and the importance of treating all individuals with respect and dignity, regardless of their race, status, or circumstances. We firmly oppose all forms of violence, discrimination, prejudice, and injustice in society. The events in this story may be emotionally impactful and are intended to be educational, encouraging viewers to reflect on moral values, fairness, and compassion. Viewers are advised to consider their emotional well-being before engaging with this content. If you feel that the subject matter may affect you personally, please proceed with caution. We hope this story sparks meaningful discussions and contributes to building a more just and compassionate society.